Hey everyone, and welcome to our Give Live webinar. I'm Matt Cromwell, Head of Support at GiveWP.com and WordPress.com. Give is an online donation plugin for WordPress. Our goal is to democratize generosity. We do that by making online donation forms as elegant, flexible, and robust as possible, while still being very user-friendly. Unlike third-party platforms, we do not add any fees to your donations. We leave all that up to you and your payment gateway of choice. That enables you to have lower fees, and that means that more people and causes can be hosting high-quality donation forms on their websites, and that, in our mind, is what we call democratization. That's our motto, democratizing generosity. What is Give Live? This is Give Live. You're at it right now. This is our 9th Give Live webinar. In just these few episodes, we've already covered things from SSL certificates and online security and form fields and recurring donations. The purpose of this monthly webinar is to provide you, our Give users, with ideas, insights, tools, and resources for doing online donations as effectively as possible. Next month, we're going to do we're going to talk all about Giving Tuesday. That's right. Giving Tuesday is in November, but there's not a better way for NGOs or nonprofits to kick off their summer, but to start planning for Giving Tuesday now. Giving Tuesday is a big deal. It's one day, you get one chance at it, and a lot of nonprofits have a lot of success on that day, but it takes planning. It takes resources. It takes forethought. So we're going to talk all about that next week. Next month. That's going to happen on Wednesday, July 12th at 5 p.m. Pacific time. So mark your calendars, watch for the announcement post on our website, and you'll get notification in our newsletter as well. Today's topic specifically is all about PHP 7, and we have a special guest with us. Jason Cosper from WP Engine is with us today. Jason and I are going to chat about PHP 7, why it's awesome, why you need it, how to get it, to make your WordPress website faster and more secure today. That's what we're going to do. So before jumping into all of that, Jason, hey man, thanks for coming on board.
Hey man, it's great to be here. We're really happy to be joining you today, and yeah, looking forward to our chat.
Tell me a little bit about what you do at WP Engine.
All right, so I am the developer advocate over at WP Engine. What that means is basically I get paid to talk to agencies, plugin and theme developers about how they can work better with our platform and how our platform can work better with them. So I'm kind of the two-way street and the communication matrix for all of the developers on our platform, both our internal and external developers.
Nice. Great. Again, thanks so much for joining us today. I definitely have a lot of things to say about PHP 7 as a consumer of it, but I definitely think that having you here as a representative of a hosting company really elevates the conversation and is definitely going to give our users some good insight. So with that, we're going to kick it off. Well, first let me say there's a comment box. If anybody is watching right now, which I know there are, we got quite a few viewers already. Go ahead and start adding your comments or questions into the comment box. You can ask questions specifically about WP Engine if you like, or feel free to ask questions about Give and PHP 7, about hosting in general, whatever you'd like. And we will fit those questions and answers into the conversation as much as we can. Cool. So with that, what is PHP 7 and why is it awesome? I have lots of thoughts on it, but generally speaking, WordPress is run on PHP 7. It doesn't exist without PHP 7. It is what's called a server-side language, and 7 is the most. 7.1 is actually the most recent version, but 7 was a gigantic upgrade to the previous versions of PHP. And that is basically like the nutshell, user-focused perspective on it. But I'd love to, Jason, how would you define PHP for our users?
Okay, for your users, the easiest way to think of PHP, it is the engine that drives your WordPress website. I'm not just saying that because I work for WP Engine and we love the driving metaphors over there. It literally is the thing that powers your website. The nice thing about PHP 7, as you said, it has kind of grown leaps and bounds over previous versions. PHP was all right and was getting a little bit faster in versions 5.5 and 6, just incremental little changes. And then a tiny company, I'm not sure if you've heard of them, called Facebook, started developing a piece of software called HHVM, short for Hip Hop Virtual Machine. Hip Hop Virtual Machine is a PHP interpreter that basically like an alternative PHP interpreter that was blisteringly fast. We actually at WP Engine used it for a little while internally and on several large test sites, and we were really impressed with the performance we got. HHVM was so impressive that the PHP developers, the core PHP developers, saw it and went, wow, we really have to step our game up. So as they were developing the new version of PHP, PHP 7, I mean, they skipped from version 5 to 7. Like, they skipped an entire number. That's how much of a sea change PHP 7 is. PHP 7, I should mention, though, is a really... It's a big change. However, it was made to be a non-breaking change as long as you were kind of complying with some standards. A lot of the stuff that they blew out was super old practices, things like that. So the upgrade for a lot of folks is fairly easy. It's just as simple as, and we're going to get into this later, is asking your host for, like, hey, can I have PHP 7, or clicking a button.
Yep. The non-breaking part is a really big deal for those who don't know that term, but you should actually, because it's actually very, very common in WordPress to talk about that as well. Basically, a non-breaking version means that you should be able to upgrade or update it without anything breaking. I mean, it's quite literally the word itself, that you're going to be able to update it without anything breaking whatsoever. That's the idea. Yeah, and like Jason said, there were quite a few things from older non-supported PHP versions that were deprecated. And if your site depended on some of that really old code, then maybe there's an issue there. And we'll get into that. But the whole concept of having non-breaking changes with such a big update is really, really a blessing. Honestly, it's such a great thing for all of us to benefit from. And I personally, I see WordPress as always leading the charge in that way. Would you say the same? Like, WordPress is like a big champion of backward compatibility, non-breaking changes. Like, that's a big deal in the WordPress space.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's one of the reasons that WordPress supports back to PHP 5.2. PHP 5.2, 5.3, 5.4, and 5.5 are no longer supported or getting security updates by the PHP project. But the fact that there are a ton of old environments that still actually run these versions of PHP, WordPress realizes that they don't want sites to be broken. The best thing you can do is, if you're running one of those old versions, is to upgrade to something new. But the fact that they don't want to break things, non-breaking changes, is definitely a blessing. Yes.
Yep. And I mean, honestly, when it comes to proprietary platforms and whatnot, breaking changes are kind of the rule. Like, it's like they're like, we can just change whatever we want. It doesn't matter. We're never going to roll back again. But because WordPress is open source and people are running it constantly and depending on it, that's been a core philosophy since day one, basically. And I in general, I feel like a lot more open source projects are embracing that. And I personally, I just like to say it. WordPress is leading the way.
For sure. I mean, even Drupal is kind of starting to adopt, Drupal, another open source CMS, is starting to adopt a more WordPress non-breaking change model. For the longest time, they have really held on to, okay, well, from version of 5 to Drupal to 6, you're going to have to recode potentially major portions of your site to get these new advantages out of Drupal. You're going to have to make sure that your modules, that's their word for plugins, are all updated and ready to go, or you might have to install like brand new code. But it's never like you basically have to migrate a site between versions of Drupal. The fact that there's these non-breaking changes with WordPress, where all you have to do is click a button, it updates, and then your site keeps running. Like if you had to download and install a new version of Chrome every time you wanted to update Chrome, and they put out a new version of Chrome like every other day practically, that, I mean, people would just be running on all these old, outdated, weird versions of Chrome.
Yep, absolutely. And everybody would be bothered every time an update came out. I mean,
For sure.
there's plenty of times when people still in the WordPress space are bothered how quickly WordPress core updates come out, which is really only like 3 or 4 times a year. But generally speaking, I always say it's free code and it's going to make your site better, and it should be non-breaking overall. But that's a whole nother subject. It's a little bit we can go down a rabbit hole there.
We absolutely could, and I can come back if you want to talk about that at some point in the future.
Oh yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, that's the one I've talked about a lot, actually. I'm sure you have too. Jason and I both see each other often at WordCamps, and Jason's a great WordCamp speaker. If you're going to a WordCamp, look for his name. You definitely want to attend and listen to his talk. Cool. So a couple other reasons why PHP 7 is so awesome is just simply that it outperforms pretty much every previous version of PHP. It's, to me, it was remarkable. Even Pamela mentioned here in her comment here, Pamela Brown is with us. She's here from Greenville, South Carolina. She said, I definitely noticed a difference when I moved the websites I managed to PHP 7. Yeah, I did too. The minute I turned it on, I was like, whoa, it's just immediately faster. There's like no changes whatsoever except for PHP 7. It was immediately quicker. And that to me was really shocking and surprising. In the article of our for this Give Live, I actually added some links today called Resources We'll Discuss. There's 3. The very first one there, if you haven't seen these things on the page yet, go to the page right now. I pasted it into the comments. And you'll see that I added this Resources We'll Discuss section. And the first one is 3 different performance tests. One by Cloudways, which is a hosting platform, and Pantheon also commented in on it. And a site called Geekflare also has a nice write-up on PHP 7 performance. As Jason mentioned, before PHP 7 was released, as it was coming up to being released, a lot of people were comparing HHVM to PHP 7, and that was the big performance thing. But generally speaking, people want to know, okay, I'm on WordPress. I'm not going to do HHVM. I'm just on PHP. So what's going to happen from 5 to 7? If you look at any of those links, you'll see that the impact is remarkable, is dramatic. Jason, can you talk a little bit into what you guys did at WP Engine in terms of testing the performance of PHP 7 and what kind of things you guys saw there?
Yeah, actually, when you linked the that list of resources, the article on PHP 7, I'm pulling it back up here, PHP 7 performance, I went and did a number of different tests on PHP 7 versus HHVM versus PHP 5.5, which is what we were running internally at the time. Our engineers also did their own tests while they were working on upgrades. And really what we ended up doing was just throwing as much traffic as possible at a server to see when things like would start to fall over, like if they would fall over. And we were getting a considerable amount more in the amount of of transactions, of amount of data transferred. At the time that I ran the test against WordPress 4.3.1, so we're talking maybe a little over, well, a little under 2 years ago. From PHP 5.5 over a 5-minute period, PHP 5.5 handled 4,300 hits roughly. PHP 7 over that same amount of time, no errors, no problems, anything else, handled about 11,300 hits. So we're talking almost a 3x performance boost, like a 2.6 roughly to 3x performance boost, and that was in line with what we were seeing.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's a really great write-up, and me personally, I love seeing the data next to each other. I mean, when you look at the one that you have with the WordPress 4.3.1 plus BBPress, because BBPress it's a great plugin, but it adds a bit to a WordPress site immediately. Seeing that right next to each other, next to HHVM, it's like, whoa, yeah, that's significant. And
that's significant, and it's a testament to how great of a coder that JTrip is, the maintainer of BBPress. Just how great him and his team who work on BBPress, do when it comes to kind of being forward thinking.
Yep, absolutely. I love looking at this data. If you guys aren't looking at the article, check out that article because it's great stuff. And each of these articles kind of approach it from a different angle of how they tested, but every single one of them shows that PHP 7 just outperforms. Of course, it outperforms PHP 5.5 really clearly, but also at that time outperformed HHVM. Before we went live here, Jason and I were kind of joking about, well, Facebook, what's your next move? I mean, you had HHVM there for a while that was live and was outperforming PHP at the time before 7 was released. And so now that PHP 7 and 7.1 are out already, what's Facebook going to do? Are they going to go back to PHP? I mean, it's probably a huge internal development cost to convert their code to be supported there, but it's just one of those fascinating questions. Now you're not the biggest dog in the house anymore. What are you going to do? Yeah. So the next big question basically is, all right, Matt, Jason, you guys convinced me. PHP 7 is awesome. I don't have it. How do I get it? The easy answer is talk to your host. I mean, it's not only the easy answer; it's basically the only answer. Unless you are, really maintaining your own server in your garage somewhere, and if you are, you're probably not listening to this webinar. But unless you're doing that, then you're going to be talking to your host to make sure to implement that for your website. In my perspective, personally, if your host doesn't support PHP 7 at all, it might be time to start looking for a different host because it's really basically best practice already because of just how dramatically better it is across the board. Jason, can you talk a little bit about how you guys support PHP 7 for your customers?
Yeah, absolutely. Right now, the way we handle PHP 7 is we actually have a guided upgrade process. So what we end up doing is we like to be a little bit more careful about, I know that there are a lot of providers out there where you click a button or a checkbox, hit submit, wait for your server to update, and then you're running PHP 7. We tend to be a little bit more hands-on than that. So we actually are currently having our support initiate a migration to PHP 7 for customer sites. So what we do is we actually move customer sites to a server that has been optimized for PHP 7, and then allow them, basically allow them to run their site there. We still keep a copy of the old site on a PHP 5.6 server. So in case something does happen, in case something does manage to go wrong during the migration, our support can basically flip it back immediately. The nice thing, and something that we think is nice about this is, sometimes it might feel a little inconvenient to have, support there kind of babysitting you. But if something goes wrong, instead of having to get support on the line, you've already got them on the line.
Nice. So I do happen to know that, like, for example, there's another hosting company named SiteGround. They basically have the ability that you can go in and you can pick which folder you want, and you can click, okay, I want PHP 7. You guys obviously made a very different choice. Instead of allowing the user to just go in and change their PHP version, I think the word you used earlier was what was the word? White glove? No.
White glove, yeah.
Yeah. Why did you make that choice to basically have the user come to you, request it, then you kind of handhold them through it? Why did you make that choice?
Really, at the time, initially, we were starting to roll out PHP 7 internally, and making it available to our customers. The way we ended up doing it was we wanted to kind of have a slow, controlled rollout, because for our support staff, our support is kind of the heart of our organization. And our support staff, if everybody can change over to PHP 7 immediately, and we host some fairly high traffic, large sites, if everybody could just switch over to PHP 7 at the push of a button without someone there to have their back, the concern was like, we had thousands of customers or hundreds of customers all hit update to PHP 7, and there was something that wasn't caught. There was a bug, there was whatever, so effectively giving them that opportunity to kind of have a little more controlled role internally was the better bet for us.
Yep, that makes sense. I mean, like we said, PHP 7 is intended to be no breaking changes, but that can be a guarantee from the PHP standpoint that it's going to continue to work just fine. But PHP can't account for all of the thousands, tens of thousands of WordPress plugins that every website is running. And I mean, I'm a plugin author. We're a plugin business, but I do know that the issue in these cases of why websites sometimes collapse isn't necessarily PHP 7, and it isn't necessarily WordPress. It's plugins that weren't prepared. I mean, can you speak into that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And I saw that Kevin in the chat asked about it, Kevin Hoffman.
Yep.
And really, the biggest kind of gotchas that I've seen when it comes to upgrading from PHP 5.5 to 7 tend to be folks who, the great thing about WordPress is that you can, there's, tens of thousands of plugins. I can't remember the exact number off the top of my head. But the bad thing about WordPress is that there's tens of thousands of plugins.
Exactly.
And some of those plugins have not been updated.
Like that, we lost Jason. He'll get back on with us soon. It's great to do live shows where sometimes things go wrong. I'll send him the link again, and he'll be back on in a second. Just to clarify, Kevin's question here is, are there any code gotchas that you've noticed when customers upgrade from 5.x to 7? Let me text Jason real quick. Yeah, so Jason said, or excuse me, Kevin was asking, are there any code gotchas that you've noticed when customers upgrade from 5x to 7? Anything for theme or plugin developers to look out for? As soon as I get Jason back on, we're going to go into a little bit of that, of how to basically upgrade smoothly from 5x to 7 without your plugins or themes getting in the way. Pamela chimes in again and says, I haven't had issues yet, but I have clients that haven't made the move yet. Yeah, in our support channels, I've had plenty of folks who say that they manage, dozens of websites for clients, and they basically um, have migrated one at a time, and it's taking a really long time because some sites are really complicated to upgrade and others are great. And honestly, in many ways, that depends. From my perspective, that depends basically on the type of plugins that they're using on their website. Um, I think Jason is coming back in right now. There he is.
Hey! Technical difficulties. Murphy and his damn law.
It's the nature of a live show.
So
Something
where
has
was
to go wrong.
So where did it cut me off?
Oh, you were just talking about how that there are times in which the plugins create trouble, basically.
Yeah. So effectively, to recap, and I'm sorry if I've repeated myself because of the drop connection. But effectively, in the WordPress.org repository, you'll see a banner that says, hasn't been updated in 2 years. I tend to say if it hasn't been updated in about a year to 6 months, like really you should consider finding a different plugin. Mainly, I say that only because WordPress has come out. Like there are major releases of WordPress 3 to 4 times a year. Lately, it's been 3. This year, it may only be once or twice. Still, that is more than every 6 months. If they are not at least kicking that version number to say it's compatible with the most recent version of WordPress, they're probably not paying attention to the little things that they need to catch. Those are the big gotchas. Those are the places that I find the gotchas. Those old plugins that are 2, 3, 4 years old, like look in the repo. Try to find something. The nice thing about the 30, 40,000 plugins is like there's likely more than one plugin that does what you need it to do. If you find a plugin that isn't being actively maintained by its developer, I'm sure that there's one out there that's being actively maintained that does close to what you need it to do.
Yep, for sure. It gets a little bit more difficult when you build your whole site around a specific type of functionality. Like if you're a membership site and you have to have a membership plugin, and if you're running on a membership site on a membership plugin that hasn't been updated in 2 years, like that is scary, no matter what.
Absolutely.
But swapping out that plugin means probably months of work, most likely, because you're going to have to swap out a lot more than just deactivate a plugin and activate a new one. So I don't mean to make any of this light in any way for certain circumstances. But in general, I totally agree with Jason that generally speaking, if there's going to be a problem, it's not because of PHP, it's not because of WordPress. It's even most likely not because of your host, though people love to throw hosts under the bus all the time.
Oh yeah.
It's most likely because of a plugin or a theme that's being problematic, or a couple plugins that are being problematic with each other. They're duking it out and wrecking your site. Cool. So that's the white glove method for upgrading customers is great. I think that's a really smart move. And like I mentioned, there are other hosts that handle it in different ways. But the bottom line in terms of how you're going to get PHP 7 is really basically depends on your host and what they are offering. If you don't see any obvious options for how to upgrade, or if they're not communicating on their blog about it, or if they're not reaching out to you in one way or another, any host that really supports WordPress purposefully, intentionally, they're out there trying to let you know about PHP 7, because as far as I understand, all the hosts love it too. I mean, isn't PHP 7 actually even a lighter load on the servers, Jason?
Absolutely. PHP 7 reduced costs effectively because of the amount of RAM needed, things like that to support the same, or in some cases even in more clients. Now, I know that there are, we don't personally do this, but I know that there are a lot of shared hosts out there that can cram users onto a server, and sometimes and some people watching may be subject to that. The hosts, those shared hosts that aren't putting their people on PHP 7 at least to kind of spread things around a little bit more, try to make the load a little bit lighter on everybody. Yeah, they're just cheating their users. The PHP 7 has been out, officially been released since December of 2015. So, over the past a little over 18 months now, year and a half, we've really, seen a lot of hosts. Like there were hosts that announced support for it like immediately, just because of the cost savings, just because of the benefit.
Yep, absolutely. I'm going to share my screen super quick here just to show this this one article. This is Jason, can you see my screen?
Yep.
Yep, this is the PHP 7 supported versions article on php.net. And just to highlight, really, basically, if you're when I'm doing support for our Give customers, I often run across customers who are running PHP 5.3, even 5.2, which you can see 5.2 is not even on this chart. It's so old that they don't even have it on the chart. But 5.3, for example, you could see that in the ones that are in red, I'm going to make this big. The ones that are in red here mean end of life, meaning PHP is no longer developing that version at all anymore. Like even if suddenly a big security risk was discovered, they're actually not going to fix it most likely. I mean, I do believe that there are probably exceptions, but generally speaking, 5.3 is dead. And that was as of, looks like August 2014. So that was, almost 3 years ago. At this point, 5.4 became dead, and it looks like October, November of 2015. 5.5 is also dead as of around July 2016. 5.6 is now no longer actively developed, no longer actively supported. And this is the actual last version of PHP that's available, the last version of 5 that's available. And you can see that it was being actively supported all the way until about January 2017, February 2017. And now it is only going to be maintained for security reasons. So 5.6 is at this point, there's not going to be any new things happening in 5.6 whatsoever. The only thing that's going to happen is if there's a security issue for whatever reason, they will update it. And that's going to be until the end of 2018. And then 5.6 will be no more. There will be no more supported versions of 5 and under again. And even on this chart, which is surprising to me as well, is that you could see that PHP 7, it's going to stop having active support at the end of this calendar year. January, around December 2017, it's no longer going to be actively supported, and it's going to go into security fix only. It's still completely stable. It's still completely reliable. It's just that all of the more active development is going to move to 7.1. So when people start saying, you really need to update to 7, it's not because it's awesome and fast and better only. Those are all really good reasons to update, but it's also because it's what is being developed. It's what's safe. It's what's stable. It's what's secure. The previous versions are really very quickly not going to be stable, reliable, and secure anymore. So that to me is a very significant piece of education that people need to understand more about. Jason, do you have any input into those versions and the timeline for those?
Yeah, I actually think it's fairly interesting that if you looked at the chart, if you look at the chart, and I'm sure you'll add that to the resources. If you look at that chart, PHP 5.6 is still getting security patches just about a month longer, maybe 2 months longer than PHP 7. That's because they know that the jump from 5 to 7 for some people might be a little scary. That's okay. Like, you do maybe want to dip your toe in, or you could want to dip your toe in if you're running a large site that is getting a lot of traffic. That really things need to stay as stable as possible. That's totally understood. But really, it's kind of there is a I believe in Latin, it's ad astra, which means ever skyward. So effectively, like that is kind of what PHP is doing, is they are constantly, and they have started constantly pushing towards making sure that people are on the newest, latest version. An initiative that Yoast SEO has undertaken. They internally, and they have a GitHub repo for it. It's called Whip, and it's literally to whip people on to a newer version of PHP, PHP 7 especially, but kind of push people up. WP Tavern wrote an interesting article just a few weeks after they started doing the notifications, the whip notifications. Yoast SEO managed to, because it's one of the more popular plugins out there, boost PHP 7 adoption from 8%, I believe, in December of 2016 to like 14%. Helped boost
of WordPress users.
Of WordPress users, correct. So, I mean, that's some pretty impressive stats, and I really think that the nice thing is that if you are a plugin developer who's watching and are interested in implementing this, I can definitely share the link with Matt to pass along. It's something that it's a minor nag. If you run Yoast SEO and are running on an older version of PHP, you might have seen it, but it is definitely useful and a nice way to kind of encourage folks to update.
Yep, for sure. I believe the way that Yoast implemented it in the plugin is it only appears for users on 5.2 currently, maybe also 5.3. I forget where he did the cutoff.
Right.
But the really old versions, he was like, if you're really ancient, then you deserve a nag to say get up to 7. From what I understand, he will be increasing that. The team over there will be increasing that version number as time goes on. Yep.
So in a few months, whatever, I'm not sure of their exact timetable, they'll move to 5.4.
Yep.
Then they'll move to 5.5. So all they're doing is they're just trying to push people, like push the boulder up the hill effectively. Hopefully it'll be a little easier than pushing a boulder up a hill, but only time will tell on that.
Yep. There's also been a lot of discussion for WordPress itself in terms of when it is going to actually require PHP 7 and more. It does not yet require PHP 7, but you could see I just pasted a link here about the WordPress requirements. They now currently highly recommend PHP 7 or greater, which was actually a really big deal when they rolled that out. So basically, at this point in the webinar, you have no excuse. We've really beat this horse to death. Like, if you're not on PHP 7, you need to start working on getting on it right away, which leads to our last topic. Jason and the team at WP Engine created this plugin called the PHP Compatibility Checker, PHP 7 Compatibility Checker, which is intended to help you to understand your plugins and your theme that you're running to see if they are ready for your site to be on PHP 7 or not. This is a great initiative that they took to inform users about the plugins and themes that they're using and the types of functions that they have built into them, and whether or not they can actually continue to run while on PHP 7. Jason, can you go into a little bit of detail about that plugin and the thought behind it?
Absolutely. So the whole concept behind the PHP 7 compatibility checker is it doesn't actually run any code in the plugin. What it does is something referred to as linting. So to kind of put this in a less technical way, linting effectively, if you think about it as rolling a lint brush, a lint roller over your clothes, like over black clothes. You're just trying to pick up the stuff that maybe shouldn't be there. What a linter does is it looks over PHP code in this case, and checks to see, okay, here's some things that may be problematic if you attempt to run this code on a particular environment. So occasionally there are some false positives, but in a lot of cases, it's really pushed a lot of users to hold some developers' feet to the fire about, hey, what is your plan for PHP compatibility? As the developer advocate, of course, I've heard the other side from developers of, man, this is annoying. Why are we getting all these tickets? I see.
You heard it from me. You heard it from me.
Why are we getting all these tickets saying we're not PHP 7 compatible when we are? And we do have a whitelist that we can put particular plugins on that we know are PHP 7 compatible. We are more than open to adding that. If any developers are watching, we'd be happy if you can show us that you're, your plugin is passing PHP tests and some sort of continuous integration or whatever. We'd be happy to make sure that you're in the whitelist. But basically, this is something that anyone can install on their site, push a few buttons, and it will tell them with the likelihood, like how compatible their plugins are with the newer versions of PHP, such as PHP 7.
Totally. It's actually a very, very, very useful and thoughtful plugin. And I'm really glad you guys did that, because I do think it's educating users really well. Like you mentioned, me as head of support, I got lots of people saying, hey, your plugin's not compatible with PHP 7. I was like, that's not true. We know that because we develop on PHP 7 every single day. Our website runs on PHP 7, and we have our plugin running on PHP 7. So I dug into what this plugin was doing, and I was like, oh, I see what they're doing. And the truth is, at the end of the day, plugins like Yoast, like all the ones on on their whitelist. I'll paste that into the comments here. This is the GitHub repo of the compatibility checker, and they have a whitelist here. All of these plugins, Jetpack, WordVents, WooCommerce, WP Migrate DB, EDD, all of these have some code in them that's basically intended to work still with older versions of PHP. So they're basically fallbacks in case you're still running those old versions. And that's what Give does as well, is we have some backwards compatibility code that the particular linting library that the compatibility checker uses is going to flag. It's going to notice that, and that's all well and good. So it gives me an opportunity to educate my users. Thanks for reaching out. This is what's happening. And then they're like, oh wow, good job. So I always take it as an opportunity, not a problem. So
yeah, we've found with users, especially when it comes to updating, making a jump to a new major version of PHP, it's better to be cautious. Again, just like mentioning the whole white glove service, it's better to be cautious when it comes to your upgrade. We understand that it's better to be cautious. So if we can do a few little things to make sure that you're informed and a little more careful with your upgrade than being kind of a cavalier, sort of like, I'm just going to push the button and then go grab a drink. Like that, I would love to do that, but that's just not the way I'm wired. And I hope that, I think that that's not the way that a lot of other folks are wired too.
Yep. Generally speaking, I would treat upgrading to PHP 7 similarly to upgrading WordPress core in terms of being cautious and careful, and even some of the methods for doing that. For example, you got to have backups. Back up your site, make sure it's backed up. Like you mentioned, you have the old PHP 5 version running while they're running on PHP 7 at the same time. That's there to make sure that they can get back on the live PHP 5 version if they have to. And also, what I generally ask people to do is if you have a staging environment in any way, or even a local environment that you can upgrade it to PHP 7, then do that first. And what I usually say is, if you have an environment like that, get it over onto staging, then deactivate all your plugins. Just deactivate all of them, and then do that upgrade, and then start activating them one at a time and check for problems, because that's typically for me has been the best way to find the problematic issue. So I start going one by one, and then all of a sudden I activate one, and then all of a sudden the site goes weird. Well, that's obviously the plugin that is causing the issue right there.
Yep.
So that generally, but having a staging environment that you can turn on to PHP 7, I don't believe that that's how it works with WP Engine, and I know it doesn't work that way with other hosts either. So generally, how would you recommend that your users? I mean, what your users, you guys walk them through it the whole time, but I mean, is there what? I mean, what are other folks going to do in general?
Yeah, when it comes to upgrading, there's something that we actually put in our FAQ for folks who are interested in upgrading to PHP 7. We encourage them to test in a virtual environment, kind of like you were mentioning. The ones that we mentioned tend to be a little more developer-oriented, such as VVV, or Chassis. However, there are ones that are a little more user-friendly. Flywheel, another managed WordPress host, does local, which is a great development environment that will allow you to kind of test things out. I am not 100% sure, but I believe desktop server supports PHP 7. Am I?
It doesn't at the
Not
moment.
yet.
Yeah,
Oh
yeah.
man. Okay, so I mean, local is probably your best bet if you need something that's a little more user-friendly. If you're really hardcore and nerdy, I was at WordCamp Orange County this weekend talking about Valet, which is another development environment for people who tend to keep things a little closer to the metal, and not have like a whole virtualized server environment. But there are options out there that allow you to run PHP 7.
Mm-hmm.
Chassis actually has a beta desktop version that's really nice right now and allow you to run PHP 7. It's a good kind of competitor to Flywheel's local. So if you want to try that, please do. But definitely run something on your desktop. Run something that is cross-platform, and just try it out.
Yep, for sure. And just like with normal backups, whenever you're ready to push it to 7, just have a plan for how you can revert, if at all possible. Like the way that you guys have that set up with the white glove service. Just make sure there's a way to be like, oh crap, this isn't working like I thought it was. So let's get it back for now and figure out what the problem was. That's always the best way to go about it. It's interesting to me that there are so many WordPress users who really expect everything to work right out of the box perfectly all the time, considering if you look at the list of developers who are involved in your website, who touched the code. I mean, it's an article I keep meaning to write, is like, thank you to, let's see, 2,000 developers who touched the code on my website who I have never talked to in my life. I mean, the way that open source works, there's so much code that in there that has never been in at the same environment ever before, maybe, and then we expect it to really have no problems whatsoever. It's actually most likely that there's going to be problems, I think. But that's what's I think amazing about WordPress is everybody's constantly trying to work it in a way that that all the code can all get along together all the time.
To speak to that a little bit, something that WordPress hosts are working on in conjunction with each other is to do what is called unit testing for new versions of WordPress on actual physical hosting environments, to make sure that nightly changes to WordPress will run on a bunch of different various hosting environments, rather than just this like kind of central like perfect server that they've crafted. So there are managed hosting companies working on this, shared hosting companies like DreamHost, also putting in some effort there. So hopefully when those unit tests go in, things will get a little better and a little smoother. So when it comes time to update to PHP 7.1 or PHP 7.2, you don't even have to think about it. Because it's already been running on PHP 7.2 on your host.
Nice. That sounds awesome. Yeah, I haven't even heard anything about that. That sounds great.
We work quietly.
In the background, making things awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. I always say a host that you never see is probably the best kind of host. It seems like we always are only talking to our hosts when there's problems. So
Yeah.
if we never interact with them, then that's the best. Not because you guys are jerks or anything. You guys are great.
No, yeah, of course.
We're working invisibly to make things awesome.
For sure.
Cool. So thanks so much, everybody. That is a wrap. PHP 7, why it's awesome, how you can get it, why you need it. Thanks so much, Jason, for being on with us. We really appreciate it. And I will definitely hit you up for another one in the future. We could talk about plugins and how they break stuff and how hosts fix stuff.
That's going to have to be a special double long episode, right?
Yeah, exactly. We got this long list of problems we're going to talk about for a long time.
Yeah, we're just going to hash it all out.
Yeah, we're going to fix WordPress's problems, all of them. Cool. Thanks so much, guys, and enjoy your day. See you in July.